Where the Innocent Die by M.J. Lee. Read by Dan Bottomley. 4:06 a.m. Tuesday, August 20th. Chapter 1. At 4 in the morning, Joe Cummings hated the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. He tried wearing different shoes, but still the squeak of sole on lino echoed in the dim stairwell. He reached the second floor and stood next to the heavy door, underneath the welcoming light of the single bulb above it. The keys rattled on the end of the chain hanging from his belt as he brought the largest one up to unlock the door in front of him, checking through the reinforced glass before he did. You could never be too sure these days. Hadn't Ronnie from the day shift found a woman lurking behind one with a pot of hot water, waiting to throw it on him? He stepped through, locking it behind him, hearing the click of the key turn in the mechanism. The large sign on the back of the door reminded him constantly of his job. Check it. Lock it. He stopped for a few seconds to listen. It was quiet tonight, but if he were honest, it was quiet every night. In the room on the right, the Iraqi man was coughing continuously. He was claiming a Section 35, but it didn't matter. He was on the list for tomorrow. In a weird way, Joe would miss him. His continuous coughing always meant there was life behind the closed doors on the second floor corridor. He checked his watch. 4:06 a.m. Just 2 hours left and he could go home. Back to the warm bed just vacated by the missus. But not before he made the kids their cornflakes and put on a pot of coffee for Andrea. His partner wasn't human until she had had her coffee in the morning. If she could, she would take it as a drip attached to the back of her hand. As it was, one pot wasn't enough for her. Joe looked up at the camera pointing down at him. He considered giving Tony a little wave, but by this time in the morning he would be nodding off. They were short-handed again, with Dave calling in sick once more. Tony had volunteered to come in on his day off. When he could have been at home, he was here staring at a bank of cameras. Who could blame him if he dozed off for a second or two? Absent-mindedly, Joe reached up to press his card against the reader on the wall, but stopped just before he did. These days, with these machines, he had to do his rounds religiously. Before, if he missed an inspection, nobody was none the wiser. But now his boss, known unaffectionately as Tiny Tim, would call him at home demanding to know why the card reader was not displaying a readout and why he had not followed standard operating procedure as laid down in the manual. Fuck the manual. He was a human, not a machine. He considered missing this one just to wind up Tiny Tim, but decided it wasn't worth the hassle. He didn't need any more demerit points on his record. He tapped the card against the reader, hearing the electronic beep to show he had registered. "And bloody beep to you too, mate," he said out loud, walking down the corridor. 8 doors on either side meant there were 16 beds on this floor. He always thought of them as beds, rather than as people sleeping on those beds. He wasn't heartless, but it was the only way to do the job when the day came for them to leave. And the day always came. This place had been called a detention centre until the government in 2014 decided to change the name to Immigrant Removal Centre, as they said to give a true indication of the role and function. But Joe knew it was just bollocks. He'd worked in Strangeways too, and they were the same. They might call them rooms instead of cells. The inmates might be called detainees, not cons. They might be deported instead of released. But here and Strangeways were the same. The whole point was to keep people locked up. The only difference, as far as he could see, was this place was far more modern, and Strangeways was the arsehole of the world. Joe stopped. What was that? In the subdued lighting of the corridor, he stared hard at number 7. Was the door open? The door shouldn't be open. The detainees were locked and secured with lights out at 9:15. Nothing was opened until the morning shift came on at 6 and went round to let them out after 7:30 a.m. Why was the door open? He glanced over his shoulder. A shiver stomped down his spine. It should be locked. Had one of the inmates got out? He rattled his keys, finding the sound reassuring in the silence on the corridor. Should he call Tony on his walkie-talkie or check it out for himself? The old bugger was probably sound asleep by now, and he would spend the rest of the shift whining if Joe woke him for no reason. The man could moan for Britain at the Olympics. God, he went on and on and on. Joe took 2 steps forward. He was sure the door was open. A dark black line stood out where there should have been nothing but the door meeting the O'Donnell paint of the wall. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Is anybody there?" hearing his own voice croak in the middle of the sentence. No answer. He tried the light switch on the wall, expecting the neon lights in the room to flicker as they always did, and flash on. Nothing. He toggled the switch 2 or 3 times, hearing it click, click, click in the silence. Still nothing. "Please come out if you are inside." He heard his voice, firmer now, more commanding. No answer. Had someone managed to get out? But the door at the end of the corridor had been locked. He gazed back at it. Yeah, definitely. He had just unlocked it himself. He pushed the door open slightly, saying out loud, "Please come out, or I will have to come in and get you, and you don't want me to do that." He took the rubber cosh out of his pocket. They weren't supposed to have these, against standard operating procedure, but all the DCOs carried them. I mean, if you had to face a violent detainee all on your own, you had to have some sort of protection, didn't you? He pushed the door open wider. The dim light from the corridor crept slowly into the room. "Anybody there?" he asked again, raising the cosh over his head, ready to strike down if anybody rushed him. There was a strange metallic smell coming from the room. What was it? He took 1 step inside the door and stopped. The light haloed the blood-stained body lying on the bed against the far wall, a deep gash on her throat, red and dripping with blood. Joe Cummings took 1 look and turned to retch onto the grey lino of the corridor. 27 days later, Monday, September 16th. Chapter 2. Detective Inspector Thomas Ridpath was feeling nervous. He'd just dropped his 10-year-old daughter, or nearly 11 as she never ceased to remind him, outside Altrincham Grammar, and watched as she had been swallowed up into the bowels of the school, clutching her BTS pencil case in one hand and her email confirmation in the other. Before she left, she had waved, saying, "Bye, Dad. Take care of yourself," and then turned and strode away, her ponytail swinging in the early morning light. There were other parents in the car park too, all equally nervous. After all, it was the day of the entrance exams, the day when the school judged his young daughter to see if she had the right qualities to enter their esteemed establishment. For the next 2 hours she would take the verbal, non-verbal and numerical reasoning tests to decide on her admission. They would get the results to see if she was accepted in October. A test for her, but torture for him. They had completed all the forms, been to the open day, practiced the previous exams at home, and now it was all down to Eve and her trusty pencil case. If it were up to him, he wouldn't have taken it all so seriously, but Eve had insisted. She wanted to go to this school and no other. Seeing her confidently stride into the building with all the other candidates, he flashed back to her as a baby, giggling happily as she shoved her big toe in her mouth, sucking on it with a smile plastered across her round face. Where had the time gone, and what had happened to that young child? He started the engine of the car and gripped the steering wheel. He mustn't get too emotional about these things. Children grow up as they had always done, and always would do. He just wished he could have the time back again, just for a moment, when she enjoyed the pleasure of sucking her big toe. He reversed out of the park.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?